How can an attorney help me see the future of being able to raise my child or children with this narcissistic, toxic personality?
The stronger the agreement is, the more airtight the parameters are, the less likely you would have ambiguities, discrepancies, and then needing to go back to court.
We've seen the repercussions of not planning accordingly. So it's spot on. It's our job. We need to anticipate that, and we're going to do that to make sure that we don't put them on a crash course. So you've made the decision that divorce is inevitable for good reason. You're not working well or communicating well or in a healthy way with your spouse. They don't want to talk to their ex. They don't want to deal with them. They don't want to interact with them. They're a narcissist. They are toxic. How do you manage that when you know that you're going to have to develop a parenting plan for these two individuals and they'll be forced to interact on some level?
The first thing I like to do with my clients is just acknowledge the fact that there is that toxicity, there is that hostility between the parents, and just put it on the table. Like, yes, you're going to have a hard time working with this person, especially now and maybe into the future. Depending on the client will depend on kind of how we want to approach the strategy. One of the ways that I like to look at it is involving the parties into like a business relationship now, where listen, you guys are business partners, if you will, and your business goal is to raise this child together. And you may not always see eye to eye, but if you remember at the end of the day that your objectives are the same, what the outcome is the same, it can hopefully help create that overall scope of what you're trying to do, and it should hopefully alleviate some of that toxicity and hostility that you might be experiencing. But we understand it's not going to alleviate all of it. That's why we have other tools and resources that we go to.
We have a lot of clients who come to see us who want to have a better understanding of how can they get through this process with a really challenging soon-to-be ex-spouse. How are they going to deal with them? How can an attorney help me see the future of being able to raise my child or children with this narcissistic, toxic personality? So in your practice, have you ever come across a situation where, in your opinion, the parties are engaging in a way that seems to be intentionally spiteful, that they are doing things to offend, upset, maybe even harm the other parent? And if so, I mean, how do you deal with that?
To answer your question directly, Holly, yeah, we deal with that all the time. I deal with it all the time. In fact, one of the biggest things we're seeing now with this pandemic and with COVID is what is going on with the child when they're with the other parent. One parent calls up the other parent and says, hey, listen, I was exposed, therefore the kids were exposed when they were with me. You're not going to be able to see them for 2 weeks, right? And that's what the CDC guidelines are. Everybody's got to quarantine. But because they're already in that toxic relationship, the other party immediately thinks, well, you didn't do enough then. You did that on purpose. You know, you're doing this, you know Christmas is right around the corner, and this is my Christmas year, and this is your way of being able to get the kids for Christmas despite me. And those are things that I have to communicate with my clients. Like, listen, I understand that on the surface, because of your history with this person, and because of other spiteful actions that they've engaged in, you would interpret this as being a spiteful act to you. And maybe it is. But maybe it's not. What drives them during these proceedings, during these conversations, is that emotional aspect. And that can, unfortunately, sway somebody off course onto what they should actually be focusing on. And that's what our job is to do, is help them stay centered and focused on what the important aspects are.
If that is a spiteful action, are they really getting ahead here? Because ultimately, if we build in that makeup time, where if they withhold the placement time from parent A, that parent A who was shorted time is going to get makeup time. So is parent B really getting ahead? I mean, that's sort of what you're saying. Am I getting that right?
Exactly. And so if it's not a spiteful act, then you would hope to assume that both parties will be able to compromise and reach a makeup agreement. If it is spiteful and we have those parameters in the parenting plan, increasing the strength of that median, if you will, then that would be accounted for with makeup time. It's like, hey, if you miss time for whatever reason it is, the other party is entitled to makeup time. And then, of course, there are avenues to proceed through the court system, but we don't want to have to do that. We don't want to have to file an action and go to court every single time that something happens where their makeup time's requested or somebody doing what they're supposed to do. That's why in order to minimize interaction with the court, you want to strengthen those parameters in that parenting plan. And that's what we're here to do for you, is strengthen those parameters.
Sounds like in cases like this where we have high conflict parties, toxic relationships, a history of that you can preemptively gauge that these troublesome interactions are likely to occur, and you can build in solutions from the onset. So when the problems occur, you already have the answer. You don't have to go back to court to get the answer. The answer is built into the agreement or the settlement.
Yeah, the key word I think you used there is anticipation, right? That's what we do here as family law attorneys at Sterling, is we anticipate particular events that may occur, and we want to make sure that the agreement is accounted for. So the stronger the agreement is, the more airtight the parameters are, the less likely you would have ambiguities, discrepancies, and then needing to go back to court. That's our job, is to help you look at all those different scenarios that may or may not arise in the future and make sure that they're accounted for in this agreement.
So it's spot on. It's our job. We need to anticipate that, and we're going to do that to make sure that we don't put them on a crash course. So much can go wrong in parenting after a divorce. That's why it's so important to have a really well thought out and detailed co-parenting plan. So I really want to delve into the topics and the focus that should be in a parenting plan, particularly for people who have a history of conflict. So is it really necessary for parties to approve of the other parent's parenting style?
Well, it's not necessary, but of course it helps, right? But we're here talking about co-parenting with a toxic parent. So odds are that they're not in agreement with the other parent's parenting style. And so how do we navigate that, right? And that's where we talk about that staying in your own lane. And you want to make sure that the parameters or that boundary we're setting is very well defined. And to use in that similar driving analogy, the less boundaries you have, right, the less that line is strengthened. As long as we're really clearly defining the terms of how we can continue to maneuver through each person's lane, the higher that median goes, which means the less likelihood that another party is going to be disrupting the other party's parenting style.
So it sounds like you are trying to remove some of that emotion, the triggering, interactions between those parties that aren't related to the children. Exactly.
Right, and so one of the reasons why they are probably going through this process now is because some of the emotional ties that generated from the disagreements and the disagreements on parenting style predominantly, right? One parent might be a little bit more relaxed, another parent might be more strict. So that's why we try to incorporate as many stringent and specific tools and resources as well as terms of a parenting agreement. Right, so the conversations are very scoped into what is for the child. And so tools, for example, like our Family Wizard is a fantastic resource that allows for that type of communication. And this tool specifically actually could put a cap on the amount of messages that are going back and forth between the parties. So that way we don't have to worry about there being a harassing over amount of text messages, communication going between them. It also even picks up on things like tone, wherein if you say something that might come across as sarcastic or even hostile, it'll notify you of, hey, maybe you want to reconsider wording this. It allows for scheduling. It allows for reimbursement opportunities for like variable costs or medical expenses, where you can put all that stuff in this particular source to eliminate unnecessary, overly complicated communication between the parties. And the one thing that's most important about this app is that it's monitored. Right, so it does have that capability of being monitored, so that way we know that the communication and the involvement with this app is strictly centered around the child.
Meaning, like a guardian ad litem or the court even could access, if need be, in a particular case, they could have the credentials to log in and see what have all these exchanges looked like, whereas something like text, I would imagine that would be really challenging to try and recapture exchanges when they occurred, what was said and by whom. That probably is trickier as compared to this app you're describing, which gives these very structured parameters with oversight. So that's really good to know. It's important to remember that once your divorce is done, you can have a parenting plan put in place that is well thought out, it is specific, and it leaves very little room for confusion and conflict. It will help to alleviate a lot of the stress and tension that you may otherwise experience with the co-parent. The good news is there are solutions out there. There are tools that an attorney with solid experience can provide to the client to make sure that we're setting them up for success. Doesn't mean it's going to be easy, but there are tools and resources out there to make life much less stressful, and more importantly, that it'll make it more likely that you will have a healthy, well-adjusted child coming out of this divorce.
Go to sterlinglawyers.com to learn more about our attorneys. Please take the time to like, comment, and share. Subscribe or follow us for weekly family law content. Thank you for watching this video with Attorney Mullin and Attorney Keenen.